Hi, I'm Clyde Haberman of the New York Times, filling in for Sam Roberts. The way news is delivered and consumed has, as you probably well know, been radically transformed. Gone are the days of putting out a paper. It's now a 24-hour news cycle with push alerts, mobile video consumption, brand extensions, and work-from-home newsrooms. The pandemic has accelerated all this, even more so now because we have a turbulent economy, some degree unraveling political system, and a large-scale war in Europe. Joseph Kahn, the new executive editor of the New York Times, is charged with making sense of all this transformation during tumult. This is his first week on the job, so thank you for joining us, and welcome, Joe. Busy
Happy
week
to join
for you.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's worthwhile to begin for readers, shows you my bias, viewers who don't quite know what the executive editor of the New York Times does. Is it the focus principally on the day's paper, or are you really going to focus more on where we would be 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Well, it's a combination of those two things. But, you know, the executive editor role, the word executive is in the job.
Right.
The focus is really the core. The most important daily priority is the competitiveness, you know, the excellence of the news report. We also have a company today that kind of is pretty united in trying to increase the overall audience for and the engagement with the digital forms of our journalism. So we work pretty closely hand in hand with our partners in the product part of the organization, you know, engineering and technology, and you know, on some of the digital subscription strategy as well. But the core part is the day-to-day kind of competitiveness, the metabolism, and the distinctiveness of the journalism that we're producing digitally.
So that if we were, let's say, we're taping on a day when the January 6th committee will have another hearing later in this afternoon, would you be involved in that kind of coverage, or would you designate that somebody else for that while you focus on other matters?
Yeah, so we spent a couple hours this morning, for example, planning out, you know, how we're going to cover those hearings, both in terms of the real-time coverage during the hearing itself.
That's right.
And then in the aftermath, you know, what our lineup is for people who are going to do analytical pieces, the classic sort of New York Times lead-all that sums up the day's hearings. But there's a lot of planning that goes in, particularly in the early part of the day, when we're going to cover something in what we call live, which is the digital form of live, which will have a combination of streaming video from the hearings, a live kind of reverse chron, you know, kind of reporter updates about the things that they're watching and learning during the hearings, and then some distinctive pieces. You know, we'll have a profile of Eastman, the lawyer who's come under scrutiny in this. We're going to have, you know, begin to put together the fuller narrative of Vice President Pence and what he went through on January 6th, which is one of the focuses of the hearings. So we'll be building those out digitally even as the hearings progress. So that kind of thing takes a fair amount of advanced planning, yeah.
I asked this next question knowing that it may drive some members of your staff crazy because they're going to think they're being ignored, and I'm sure they're not, but are there specific areas of coverage that have your immediate priority?
I think one of my responsibilities is to make sure that I don't overweight, you know, one part of the report or another. I mean, you know, I spent many years, obviously, as a reporter on our international desk and then as editor of international, so I'd be lying if I said I don't want to make sure that we continue kind of the excellence of that and the competitiveness of our international report. But, you know, I also care deeply about, you know, the city that we're all living in, New York City. I focus quite a bit on business coverage. We're in a very rocky environment economically at the moment. Markets are having another pretty awful day today, it looks like. The Fed is in the fastest period of raising interest rates to try to combat inflation that we've seen in 40 years. And, you know, we're in a pretty dramatic economic period, so I'm watching that very closely. I also really want to make sure that we continue to provide, relief to people, both through our culture and lifestyle coverage, through the excellence of that part of the report, to offer people something other than the, you know, not always kind of heartening developments in the world of general news. So those are all key focuses.
Have you learned in the last few years things that you might not have thought of before about how our news report is consumed? Are there things that have surprised you in your preparation for this new job? Of that, oh, people are reading us differently from how I might have thought they would have.
Certainly one of the biggest differences from the print newspaper days are on certain kinds of news events. You have people who are staying with you throughout a breaking development. That's a new reader phenomenon. So the idea that people will not only come in once or maybe for really habitual readers a couple times a day to check in, but actually stay with you during a breaking development, maybe return repeatedly to the same digital experience to learn about updates. That's a completely different reader experience, which is actually a little more akin to the way people used to treat sort of broadcast TV, right? If something big is happening, you might turn it on or you might go back to it to see what the latest is. Not so much the way people thought of newspapers in the past, but I think we're evolving to serve readers in that way pretty effectively, actually. We're also really pleased to see that some of our best, kind of longer form journalism, when presented in compelling ways, can perform well even on a mobile phone. There's a surprising younger demographic of reader who, for the right kind of journalism, the right kind of storytelling, will stick with you, for what might be even a 15 or 20-minute engagement. Completion rates on certain, really nice pieces of journalism are pretty impressive on mobile. So we are learning more about the way readers behave, both in terms of frequency, but also their willingness, when you present it properly, to really stick with a compelling piece of journalism right to the end.
I was going to ask this later, but since we're on this topic now, is there an inherent tension between the longer form journalism that we also do and this need for quick hits on a device, whatever that device in your hand is?
There is always
where do
a
you strike
tension
the balance
between those.
on these?
Yeah. Reporters and editors talk about that quite a bit. It's not easy to shift seamlessly between almost Twitter mode in terms of immediacy, but also to be thinking about the most distinctive, kind of exclusive elements of your kind of reporting targets that are going to take a much longer time, a more in-depth way of reporting and then relating. We have to help people balance those two things. We don't want people, kind of being only focused on the urgent now all the time, and we don't want our best people only focused on what they're going to deliver a year from now in terms of an investigative. But we want to give people a wide range of opportunities to serve readers throughout that spectrum. And that just requires a lot of guidance, a lot of conversation. Hard for a reporter to figure that out entirely on his own or her own. So we have to help provide that feedback and guidance to people.
You are, to sort of reveal how old I am, you're the ninth executive editor since I first started at the New York Times as a copy boy, a term that doesn't exist anymore, way back in 1964. You're the 10th if we count Joe Lelyveld's brief second turn. I've got to believe you've examined their leadership styles to some degree. Any specific lessons you've taken away, without necessarily naming names of the good, bad, and ugly? But
obviously, as reporters and then as editors, we're pretty close observers of our leaders over time, and we pick a lot of things up. I mean, I do think that one consistent thread through all the executive editors has been what I described at the outset, which is people get intuitively that we're going to be judged by the quality of the journalism that we produce. No executive editor that I think feels that they can just kind of disengage and delegate that to someone else to make sure of. Every one of them consistently is a smart journalist, totally understands that the integrity of the report, the competitiveness of the report, the revealing nature, the exclusive nature of the report is ultimately going to make his or her legacy, and so that has been a consistent theme. I have seen, up until quite recently, and I think my immediate predecessor, Dean Baquet, kind of hovered in the middle there, but we really have not until fairly recently had an executive editor who I think is really focusing on translating that journalistic mission into, on a day-to-day basis, how it's going to manifest itself digitally. Right? There's been, a long and valued tradition at the New York Times for treating print as the final, product, even during the, many, many years, many decades now of the existence of the web. Print has been sort of the end game at the end of every day.
Right.
And most of the effort has gone into refining the journalism for the end of the day print product as sort of the distinctive archive version of the Times. And we're going to keep doing that for years and years. But I think, Dean felt, and I feel even more strongly, we have to channel that kind of journalistic energy, but also excellence into the digital report, where we're reaching far more people now, millions more people, than we do in print or ever could in print.
But do you have any concern at all? Well, to back up, when I had my Metro column years ago, I used to periodically speak to groups, and I would sometimes speak to groups of older folks. And I remember one group in particular out in Queens, they were distraught that when the stock tables were scrapped on the paper. And I guess I'm among those who are distraught that we no longer have the sports listings. Again, where do you strike that balance between wanting, of course, a younger audience, a more digitally savvy audience, but not wanting to alienate an older crowd that, while may also get its news digitally, it still feels comfortable having some dead tree in its hands, like me?
I hope for many, many years to come. And I very much enjoy the print New York Times every morning. It's a great way to see a really smart sampling of the depth and the breadth of our coverage, to spend more time with individual stories that are of interest, but also, in a very intuitive way to kind of open up the package and see the way, opinion is on its opinion page. There's a business section. Our culture report is robust. If you care about sports, we'll put that all together for you and have a nice package. Print is a very special package of journalism every day, and we have a very loyal print audience that, in my view, we can't take for granted. There are some things that we've done over the years to make print easier to produce. It cannot be to the same degree at the center of everybody's kind of workday the way it was historically. So we do need to make it a bit more downstream of what we're producing for the digital audience, and make it easy for a very large and talented print team, including a design team, to put it together every day. And certain print legacy products, like, say, the sports agate or the stock tables, actually take a lot of people power to produce every day, and they really slow down print production. So to really preserve the excellence in print as the best package of our original journalism, we have had to kind of make it a little easier to produce. But I'm hoping that actually extends the lifespan of print, keeps our emphasis on making that great package every day, and make sure that it really is focusing on our best journalism and how to showcase that in print.
We're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're with Joe Kahn, the new executive editor of the New York Times. Joe, the Times, something you said before triggers this question. The Times is widely seen, probably correctly, as a liberal paper, and as much as we insist on objective neutrality and how we cover things. Nonetheless, does the perception undermine our credibility to some degree? Have we taken a hit in that regard? And in an age of, I know you've spoken out on this to folks on the staff, in the age of Twitter, which we've been in for at least a decade, of reporters expressing their opinions for the world to see on a forum such as Twitter, does that just change the nature of not only how we're perceived but who we are?
I think it's a good question. I think we did put out a new statement about our best thinking about Twitter, and the bottom line is that we understand some reporters, particularly beat reporters with a degree of expertise in a certain topic or geography, get some benefit out of creating a direct way for people to follow them on Twitter, and they also can get a combination of ideas for stories and tips, source development, and also sometimes constructive criticism from their journalism when they circulate and get an audience for their journalism. But we felt too many people are spending too much time on Twitter, going down rabbit holes, engaging in some of the more toxic elements in that platform, either fighting with or overindulging critics, particularly a small group of very active media critics who are constantly coming after the New York Times, making people feel defensive, making them even feel somewhat vulnerable. And we felt that people should just do that less, spend less time on it, pay less attention to it, focus on the much larger and I think much more engaged and curious audience that we have overall for our print and digital report.
Are you on Twitter at all?
I am on Twitter, but I've taken my own advice, and I'm using pretty infrequently, to be honest. Yeah, particularly in this new role. I think it's time to kind of take a step back and try to engage with the audience in more fulfilling ways.
Are we seen, do you think, as taking sides in America's culture wars? Are we seen as perhaps so woke that we turn off folks in some ways, or maybe attract others in other ways? I should have given that side of the equation.
As you're well aware, there's no shortage of people who have very clear views about which side of the issues the New York Times is on, and there are many who see us as...
I was the Israel correspondent for 4.5 years.
You've experienced
still have lash
that.
marks on my back.
You've experienced that. And actually, to be honest, coverage of Israel is a pretty good test for whether you can kind of have a stiff backbone for coverage of the United States in the moment, because there doesn't often appear to be a lot of people who are undecided in the middle. They have very strong views on every issue. I think it is the mission of the New York Times on the most divisive cultural, social, and political issues of our time, including those in which people are very divided and where the arguments are really hot, to continuously challenge ourselves to find a well-rounded way of covering those issues. Not always in line necessarily with what any individual member of our staff thinks is the right or wrong answer to those questions, but in a way that challenges ourselves and our readers to consistently think about those issues from perspectives other than their own, as well as from their own perspective, to cover the news, but also to look for different angles of entries on those stories. And we're one of the few independent media companies that's actually committed to doing that.
Yeah.
Are there moments where critics on one side or the other will look at us and say, there they go again, they're biased in that direction? Of course there are.
It's always been this.
And it will always be that way. But I think, and I am committed to trying to keep our staff constantly looking for angles of stories that we're missing, that we may need to explore to fully explain some of these issues to a broader readership, that challenge ourselves to learn new things, that approach many of these most divisive topics with a degree of empathy and the idea that people may see them differently than we see them ourselves, or people in our family see them, or certainly that the dialogue on Twitter suggests that people should be seeing them, right? And that means going out and reporting, it means listening carefully, it means challenging yourself, and it means writing with a degree of open-mindedness. So that's our commitment.
All right. An important commitment. The Times is obviously now on a course of being a national and international newspaper. Nonetheless, we are the New York Times. What are the chances of getting the Metro section back, or at least a more distinct and larger Metro presence in the front section, the A book in our jargon?
So we have a pretty flexible approach now to making sure that Metro is given pride of place in our print report. I understand that there's some nostalgia for having a separate freestanding Metro print section, but we've actually incorporated New York coverage more fully and completely into a kind of a national report now. There are distinctive moments where Metro plays a big role. Obviously, on the front page, but often is given, an expansive hold on space within what we call our A book, our front section. And And we still continue to have a metropolitan section on Sunday to feature some,
Right.
some kind of good storytelling with a metro theme. My view is we don't have a cap on the amount of New York coverage that we're going to incorporate in the report. We have a global audience as well as a local audience that's really interested in New York. New York's in our name. It's really a world capital of culture and commerce. And we're not seeing that there's a real sharp ceiling for the audience for great New York coverage. And that's one of the reasons we've continued actually to expand our metro staff. We have more people covering New York, thinking hard about New York than we did 5 years ago, and we don't know that we're done expanding that yet.
That'd be good. At some point during Donald Trump's presidency, a decision clearly was made that we will begin to call his lies what they are, lies, not misstatements of fact, not miscasting of a fact, and so on, but he lied. Could you take us into the process that went into that? Clearly, at some point, a decision was made. We have to call it for what it is. And does that then risk being seen as taking sides, or is this just journalistically the only honest way to go about it? And does it set a pattern going forward, not just for somebody who is monumentally unfamiliar with the truth, as Donald Trump, but other politicians as well?
Yes, we had a rigorous process and still do, for thinking about how and when to use the word lie in a headline, prominently in a news story. And the standard remains high. It is for the use of repeated falsehoods, provably false through our own reporting, that whoever it is, Donald Trump or any other kind of leading figure in the society, has full and complete access to accurate information and chooses to continue to repeat a falsehood. In those cases, we are not holding back from calling something a lie. We don't want to use lie in every story. We certainly don't want to use it in every headline. We don't want to over-advertise it, but we don't want to shy away from calling something a lie when it meets that threshold.
You shared a Pulitzer Prize for your coverage of China. We don't have a full complement of reporters there now, do we? And in Russia, frankly, I'm not quite clear what we have. I have not seen a Moscow dateline, Lord knows, in a while, not since this war began. How badly has this hurt our coverage of these two obviously very important countries? How are we getting information on what's happening there?
You're right.
Without endangering people, I should add.
Yeah, and the two cases are slightly different, but unfortunately with a similar result in both. In China, there was under the Trump administration, but continuing into Biden, a diplomatic standoff over access for reporters from each country, visa access. So the Trump administration cut down very sharply on the number of Chinese state media reporters who would be allowed to, report and live in the United States. China retaliated by forcing nearly all of our correspondents, but also those for the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, to leave the country. We had one remaining American correspondent in China. There's recently, under a not quick, but somewhat constructive dialogue going on between the Biden administration and the Chinese, some modest reopening, and we do expect to get quite soon another reporter back full-time, and then I hope a couple more in the future, but that's still going to be significantly down from the 10 plus that we had at one point for the world's second largest economy, its most important authoritarian political system. China, we're reporting really as best we can on China from the outside, from Hong Kong, from Taiwan. We have a big office in Seoul. We still have a big staff devoted to covering China. Obviously, there's a lot of digital information available. We use our best contacts inside China to continue to report on it, and we'll get our staff back as soon as we can. Russia's situation is different. Russia passed a new national security law They criminalized reporting, certain kinds of accurate reporting on the war that's unfolding on Ukraine. And we're very explicitly, did not rule out the fact that international correspondents who were there may be subject to that law. So we felt that it was prudent for us to at least temporarily remove the staff until we could make sure that they could report and do their jobs there safely. We are hopeful that we will be able to navigate that with Russia. It's important for us to have reporters on the ground there, even in a country that's engaged in this kind of hostile action. We want to be there. We want to be able to bear witness on the Russian side. We want to hear Russian point of view. We want to incorporate that in our report. It's important for our correspondents to be able to get back there, but we have to be able to do that safely.
Absolutely. We only have about a minute left. Again, at the risk of driving some members of the staff crazy, any areas of coverage that you think the paper needs to get better at?
Many. We're constant, we face, the New York Times is a big presence, news organization, on the internet, but we face competitors from every direction. I think hard, about all aspects of our international report. Obviously, there are very large and well-funded organizations covering business and finance and technology. We need to remain competitive in that space. Thinking really hard about how to translate, our robust culture and lifestyle and books coverage into, a form that really increases the audience for it digitally, that maintains that print audience, but really creates a really robust new digital identity for that coverage. So I don't think in any sense that our report is a finished product. It is absolutely an ongoing area of focus to continuously improve multiple parts of it.
Fair enough. Thank you, and good luck to Executive Editor Joe Kahn. Thank you very much again.
Glad to be with you. Thank you.
For CUNY TV, I'm Clyde Haberman of the New York Times. Thank you for joining us.